welcome to the Standard Array on a Sunday evening. I have my wonderful co-host, PB Plays Inside, with me tonight. I am SirLucien from SirLucien Gaming, and we're here on my channel, SirLucien's Twitch, and just want to say welcome if you're here. And if you join throughout the show, that's great. If you watch this on YouTube, you can go ahead and leave comments, and we're just going to kind of jump right in. So we do a lot of gaming. We'll probably introduce ourselves. So I do a lot of GMing or DMing of games on the channel. So a lot of actual plays on Roll20, playing things like D&D, and sometimes we play some other games like Star Trek Adventures, or we play hopefully some of the Numenera we've played, and we're going to get into some of the other new ones coming up hopefully soon. And I do some other YouTube videos that are mostly kind of related around that. We did some character building videos, and hopefully to get some more up pretty soon for other type game, role-playing game stuff. And I'll let PB introduce herself and tell you a little bit about what she does on her channel.
Hi, I'm PB from PB Plays Inside. I have a YouTube channel where I do a bunch of gaming stuff, and the occasional D&D thing on there also. I'm mostly over on Twitch nowadays, in which I do pretty much the same thing, where I game a lot. Most recently Minecraft. I've done some Rainbow Six Siege before, and some platformers, which are my jam. I do some music piece stuff on there, and I do some D&D stuff, or RPG stuff in general. It doesn't have to be D&D. It's just, we all come into the world thinking about D&D when we talk RPGs. Aside from that, I'm a player in a bunch of games. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah,
that's me.
We do this Sunday evening show. It's about an hour long, and we talk about a lot of role-playing, different role-playing topics, because both me and PB are huge fans in the last couple years of kind of the whole resurgent or renaissance of role-play games that are out there. And though D&D is one of the more popular ones, and we do talk about that at times, we really also want to cover a lot of the other ones that are out there, because we're excited about all of them. We always have more games that we want to play than we actually have time to play. So if you ever have suggestions for our show or things you'd like to hear us talk about, you can always send those over to us through our Twitter for the show, which is @StandardArray, and we check those out, and we can always add them to our agenda. But a lot of times we just come up with things that we're interested in, or things that popped up over the week that maybe were relevant in the community at the moment. And tonight's show is all about world building. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different aspects of world building. Now, we're coming at it from a couple of different points of view, which was what we think makes the show interesting, and hopefully you'll find interesting from us. As I'm probably about a 2-year DM at this point. PB has been a long-time player with us, thinking about doing some of that stuff, but looking for the right game, looking for the right players, taking her time, definitely not rushing into it. But we all have that want or need, or sometimes would love to express our creativity with world building, whether it's in a game, for a game, or if you're just imagining while you're reading something like a book, or you're watching a movie and you're trying to expand a little bit on your mind. You're taking those concepts and saying the what ifs, what's over here, what's over there, what didn't we see, what's kind of off the screen or off the page. And in game design, or in role-playing games, there's a lot of times where you're developing a lot of things that are going to be visited in the game, or you're going to go to that place in the game, or it's going to have some type of relevancy to the story narrative that you've come up with. And don't think it's just a DM or GM kind of thing, because in a lot of types of role-playing games, it's a collaborative story game. So like a good example is PB played Dungeon World not too long ago on one of our breaks from a Dungeons & Dragons game. And in Dungeon World, it's encouraged that the player comes up with pieces of the world, even during character creation, and then even during the way the game plays. So you can be a world builder, you can be part of that process, even if you're not a GM or DM. So we hope that you can find something interesting from, kind of us talking about it. So pretty big topic for us tonight, PB. Where do you think we want to start first? Where do you want to take this? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, there we go.
There
I'm
we
not
go.
muted anymore. See, the thing that happened is that I paused your video over on Twitch after it was really loud, and I thought that was the mute button. Doesn't work that way, turns out. So I think we should start off with talking about how to build in a world that already exists. Because coming up with your own stuff, well, maybe it's hard for some people to come up with your own stuff, but I think it might be more difficult to be creative in a world that is already populated with things, already
Mhm.
has a rich backstory, a rich history, one that maybe you know, maybe you don't know. So one of the big ones would be some solid Star Trek.
Oh,
That's not
yeah.
where you thought I was going to start, but
No, it's not
how
not at
about
all.
some Star Trek? Because D&D huge, Star Trek enormous. So Star Trek decades, right? I think it's half a century at this point.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. 50 years, 60 years of TV, but they also had a big run of books and comics and other things that supported it. Maybe not as popular as the shows, but full feature movies, redone movies, movies that are pretty acclaimed. Some were good and some maybe not so well received, but definitely a major franchise. So there's a lot there.
And added on all the time, you know? I
Hmm.
mean, even right now, there's a show on right now of Star Trek, of the new generation.
Yeah.
Um,
Or shows
so,
like it,
yeah.
movies and stuff based on it. If you watch things like Orville, the new TV show, very
Mhm.
Star Trek like, but a different world. Also, there was the movie that was Galaxy Quest, very Star Trek, but a little bit different. And then there's been all kinds of other shows. So when you're talking about what's interesting about those kind of worlds, and if you're talking about building within, I think, a world that exists, is you have some reference material to maybe go back and look at and get some ideas of the overall tone and the overall kind of main pieces of whatever that world or universe is. And in Star Trek case, we're talking about a universe versus maybe just a world or a continent if we're talking about like a fantasy role play game of some sort. And what's great about that is you have a lot to draw from, but in a world that's that big or a universe that's that big, you still have room to do whatever you want. You still have room to put in your own creativity and couch it in some of the other things that are more familiar to players, which is really nice.
Yeah, totally. And you still have a lot of room to put stuff in. There's a lot of space in space. There's a lot of planets out there that they just zoom on past, right? You could say, oh, hey, there's this thing. There are plenty of fleets. We're just following one captain, one crew, sometimes a few, but for the most part, one, right? We
Mhm.
know their adventure, but there's other stuff that's happening. There's other world ending situations in the galaxy that you can totally be part of. And I think for Star Trek, I know there's been previous RPG iterations of Star Trek,
Mhm.
but in Star Trek Adventures, I think it really gives that to you immediately. It immediately is like, here's this part of the world. They have their thing going on, but here's this part of the world. This is what you can be doing. This is what your crew is. You just got out of school, essentially. You're just
Mhm.
trying to figure out your place in the world, and this is where we're doing it in this planet that you may or may not have heard of, and maybe you made up right on the spot. Also coming up with names in Star Trek, pretty fun, not difficult to do. And the same thing with monsters. If Leonard Nimoy can hold a dog with a unicorn thing and a very cheap mane, you can come up with something. You could put it in Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah, and it's what's great about that style is how much room you have to look at either the micro or the macro of what you're doing. So, like you're talking on the planet level, but even if all you wanted to do was build a couple of races, that's going to work in a Star Trek setting. That's going to work in that futuristic sci-fi setting. If you just wanted to build a whole adventure around a space station, and that's the only place it was really going to take care of or take actually
Place.
happen on. Yeah, take place on. There we go. And in the Star Trek Adventures, they started us off like you said, coming out of Starfleet, and we were going to the Shackleford Expanse, I believe is what it was called, or the Shackleton. Maybe it was the Shackleton Expanse. And you were going out to a space station, but your adventure kind of happened before you got there at a planet that may or may not actually exist in the canon of Star Trek. But once the game starts playing, you get to create that kind of stuff. What I like about that And what I like about what we're talking about is that if you're not comfortable with building an entire world, if you don't have time to build an entire world, and you're already a fan of that genre, of those shows and of that universe and place, you can take from that but still have room to put your own in, and still have a very compelling game for your players. The other thing that's nice about using an existing world is you have to typically do less explaining to your players, because a lot of your players are going to have exposure to those things that are more mainstream or more knowledgeable, that people have seen out there. So it's a little easier to get their buy-in to say, oh, okay, I'm an ensign in the Starfleet. I know exactly what you're talking about when you say Starfleet. I know exactly what you're talking about when we're going out to a starbase. I totally get what a tricorder is. I'm in. I'm on board. Let's go with this adventure. Even if all of a sudden we're on a planet full of talking five-legged cats that need our help to save the planet somehow. Like, even though that doesn't show up anywhere in Star Trek, they're in on it because that sounds like something that could happen in Star Trek. So I think starting with something that is established, don't be afraid to then still put in your own little touch to it, because that's really what all these people have done. The people that write the comic books, the people that write the books, they're grabbing their little corner of that universe and saying, in this part, I get to decide what's going on here. And that's exactly what a DM or a GM is doing. And the other great thing about that setting is you can mess with timelines. They've established there's a multiverse. So there is a way to say that, well, the Enterprise on this branch of the multiverse works a certain way, even though it's not exactly the same way as the movie went. And you can just explain it away that, hey, we're on a different branch of that timeline, or we're in a multiverse, or we're in a one of those other infinite realities of Star Trek, or we're in a holodeck, and it all was just a program that once the whole adventure's done, we all walk out of the holodeck and we go back to our duties on the ship. There's so much you can do with a Star Trek, and this could go over to a Star Wars. This could go over to any of the really big genre-defining kind of settings that you might want to place your game in.
And don't be afraid to break it. Just like you're not afraid to break something in your own world, don't be afraid to just wreck everything. Don't be afraid to just like set up this beautiful, beautiful planet with all these cool things that you've spent so much time on and your characters know very well, and then just have somebody come and destroy it all because that's your big bad evil guy. Hey, welcome to the last arc of your story.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to do that. Even if it is like something absolutely beloved, like the Enterprise, or one of your favorite captains.
Sometimes people just like things to burn. That's they're just sometimes they just want to see what happens when it all gets destroyed. Or even the idea, I like where the route you were going with. It's those what ifs. I mean, we've seen them in comic books, we've seen them in stories to say, we know what the normal story was, but what if we changed this one thing and then we played it out to see how all of that would fall like a set of dominoes because this one thing changed. And you can do that in a Star Trek. What if Captain Kirk wasn't the captain of the Enterprise and it ended up being, Spock? Or some other person, how would that have changed? And that's what we're going to role play out, and that's what we're going to play out. So there's a lot there that we can do to play in that space, and you have a lot of room and to make it your own. I think that's the big thing, is make it your own. We're playing in a Dungeons & Dragons, we're playing in Forgotten Realms, but there's still a lot of places that I've taken our players to that the way I ran the town of, say, Yarder, or I've ran the town of Longsaddle, is going to be very different than anybody else ran it, because all it is a name on a map. There is nothing that tells you exactly what's there and what to do. So we're creating that as we go, even though it's a very established kind of world. So.
And talking about Faerun and the Sword Coast, D&D, another huge, enormous world with so many books, with so much lore, so many big apocalyptic things that have happened. Apparently magic at one point just wasn't there, and there was a whole thing, and then it's no longer a thing.
Yeah.
Yep, there's a bunch of drama with their gods. There's drama in between the planes. There's a whole bunch of stuff in D&D. And I think people hold that one a little bit more belovedly and hold it a little bit more like, no, I have to stay true to what this book says, that my favorite author wrote when I was you know, 9, and I was reading these books from the library, you know? But I think the same deal. Break it, destroy it, fuck it up. I believe in you.
Yeah. Make it your own, really, or make parts of it your own. Stick with what the
Mhm.
things you like. Stick with things that your players are kind of interested in, but then grab those little places that make it yours. Your campaign is your campaign, and they've said quite often that those worlds all exist. It's a multiverse. So if I run a game there, PB runs a game there, Jordan runs a game there, Graybeard runs a game there, all friends of the show. All our worlds exist, exactly the same, even if we're all running in the Sword Coast. It doesn't matter. It's just a huge multiverse out there of all these worlds that are being run, and it's a cool way to think of it. And I think you can think of that with any of the games that you're playing, whether it's that style of game we just talked about, science fiction style, a fantasy style. I know we put one in there for Masks was another one. During Gen Con last year at the 50 year, I ran Masks the Next Generation. Great superhero game in Halcyon City. And even in the front of that book, they tell you the city's a character, but they still want you to flesh it out. They want you to create the districts or the areas where crime are, or the industry area, or where the rich people live, and where the slums are, and where crime happens. It's all for you to build and make. So don't feel like if you're using an existing setting that you're handcuffed. If you take anything from tonight's discussion, is that we're trying to take those handcuffs off. We're trying to give you that permission to just use it any way you want. Use what you like, change what you don't, and have fun with the players. Do stuff that you think your players are going to have fun with.
And some ways you can do that. Some ways you can just, have things, not have other things. Like, for example, say you want to run a world that is completely the same as your favorite storyline. Say you want to do that, but there is a character you just really can't stand. You hate that character, you don't want to run that character, you don't want anyone to run into that character, you don't even want to remember that character exists. You can do that. You can do that. People take vacations. People go visit people in different towns. People visit other planes. They could be somewhere else. They could still be in your world and their influence can still exist there. But hey, maybe they were like really tired of the snow up in the Sword Coast, and they decided to take a vacation down to Chult. Maybe they were like, hey, I haven't really visited the East very much. Let me go meander over there for a while. It takes a while to travel in D&D for the most part, unless you teleport. But sometimes you want to see the sights. So you can do that if you want to get rid of a character, or you can kill them off. But you could always just do that. You don't have to do something drastic. Yeah, or they don't exist.
Yeah.
You can exist in certain worlds. Certain things could have happened, certain things could have not happened. Maybe the spell plague stayed. Maybe that exists. Maybe your world is now a magicless world, or a very limited magic world. Maybe that's why no one uses magic in your world. You can take influence from things that existed before and put them in your world, sort of like we were talking in Star Trek. Use them to your advantage. Don't make it a disadvantage that you're living in somebody else's world. Take that and run with it. Because honestly, that is what the authors would have wanted.
Definitely. Yeah. They mostly say that in the beginning of any of the books you read where they talk about the core rules. It's about, these are rules that you can use to run your game, but do what's fun at the table. If something needs to be changed, then change it so it's fun. If a setting needs a couple of adjustments so that your group and you are having fun, or you get the right tone out of it that you want. I mean, if you want the Star Trek setting, but you want more of a suspense, horror-filled, kind of alien-esque game that you're running, you can do that in that world. Even though it's a brighter kind of utopian world, you can turn it a little dark when you want to. You can mash up some things. You can bring in different tones to explore those settings, and don't make it just a hindrance about, I have to stick to canon. I think that's the biggest mistake, and I remember making it when I started running Storm King's Thunder, because in the beginning, when I picked that module up and I was going to play it for my players, my mind immediately went to, oh my god, I got to learn everything there is to know about Faerun, because my players are going to ask me about it, and they're going to expect me to know, and I need to know all this stuff. And it's overwhelming, because there's books, there's setting guides, there's 20 or 30 years of history for Forgotten Realms that you can go into, different versions of the games that changed things, rewrote things, and all of a sudden it's overwhelming. And then I think I quickly realized that I didn't really need to do that. I needed just to pick the things that I was interested in, and then I could make up the rest as we went or when we needed it. I didn't need to know a lot of that ahead of time. And in reality, your players ask you mostly about current stuff and very little about what happened 200 years ago. Even though when you first start to kind of make your game up or you're getting ready, in your mind you feel like, oh my God, I got to know all the timeline, but for the last 1,000 years, just in case. And really, you don't.
Yeah, very much exactly. And talking about such rich worlds, there's also RPGs out there that allow you to use other worlds, but aren't designed with them in mind. There's a game out there called Masks, which some of you may or may not know. It's basically a game in which you get to create your own superhero and do superhero stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And now we all know that. We all grew up with DC, cartoons. We all grew up with X-Men. Now, most recently, the Marvel Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
We know all about heroes. They're no secret to us anymore. But Masks, you can run whatever you want. You can run your DC world with your Justice League. You can run, your Marvel world where, you get to interact with all these different cool people. You can have your Avengers. You can have your Infinity War. Or you could just be, John from down the street. You could be the Spider-Man, the poor man's superhero, essentially, where all of that exists somewhere. But here, I'm just going to do my thing. And, if you want me, I'll head over, but I'm just going to chill here and do, deal with petty crime here and the occasional supervillain.
Yeah, it really does encourage you to bring in the things that you're familiar with, things that you feel fit into your game, and give you permission kind of to mix and match those kinds of things. There's nothing that says you couldn't play a game where the Marvel characters and the DC characters both existed. And so you could pull, because you are a fan of Batman, or you are a fan of Black Widow, or you are a fan of, you just watch Black Panther, so you want to run something that involves Wakanda, and anything, or Image Comics, or any of the other types of comics that are out there. Indie comics are out there. There's plenty of that stuff. And all of that can come together and you can play that game. I think what they really tell you about in Mass is the only thing they're really trying to push is that they want you to have a teenage angst kind of game. But where that takes place doesn't matter as much as the interaction between teenagers dealing with new powers and dealing with relationships with the other members of their team, and how they interact with adults is a fun role-playing exercise, is a fun role-playing game to do when you can just kind of let that go. And I think Mass really pulls that out and really encourages you to do those kinds of things. And that's what's, if you're looking at the game you're playing, a lot of times they'll tell you what to really emphasize so you have an idea of how you want to kind of run that game. And that's, building off of stuff that's already there, right? But there's nothing that says, and in fact, most I think dungeon masters or game masters come to the idea of, I'm going to be the person in charge, I'm going to run the game, because they've got the itch to build a world, right? They get this, it's what brought me to it, because once I couldn't find a game to join, and I started looking at, hey, I'm going to look at what game I want to run. I want to run Numenera, or I want to run, in fact, Numenera is what I picked. I read about the Ninth World, and my imagination exploded when I read that setting. And I thought it left so much open for me to just imagine thousands of adventures that we could go on if I got a group of people to play, and it was going to be great. And I realized right then and there, why did I wait so long to be a game master or a dungeon master? Because I get to build a world. I get to be the one who says, over there is a mountain, and in that mountain, it's not really a mountain. It's actually a starship that has crashed, and over the aeons, it's just covered in dirt at this point. But once they figure out that lying beneath that is this giant, massive starship that's been there for a millennia, it's going to be a great adventure when they figure that out, and I get to create that. or I get to create a new race, or I get to create a new creature, or I get to create a storyline. And there's a lot to it. So world building can be a lot about taking something you already know, or taking something from the book that you're running, or it gives you, almost every one of those books gives you the rules or the ideas to say, or the keys to the car to say, create your own from scratch, right? If you just want to do all of it your own way, you can create your own world, which is super exciting for somebody who wants to let their creativity out.
Yeah. And Numenera, I think, really, that's the design of the game. It is, here are the keys to the castle, have fun. What's the history? Everything. It's all happened. Or none of it has happened, and you're here before it does. You could do either or somewhere in the middle. And if you read the big blurb at the beginning of that book, that's pretty much what they say. You can, like you said, find something random that was lost ages ago. Your world is absolutely old. And even if that seems so overwhelming, that so much has happened, and you think, I have to think of it all, I have to know. Well, most of it is lost to time. So you only have to know like this much about it, and you can come up with it as time goes. I mean, you could just look at our current history. You could look at things like, ancient Mayan society and how little we know about that. Or you can look at things that are more recent, like Wakanda in Black Panther. That is based off of a lot of African culture and African tribes, and there is a lot about gods in there that exist there. And I bet a lot of people don't know much about that because you just don't study it. And it's the same thing in your world. There's a lot of stuff that exists there, and you get to come up with it. You get to be, you rolled a random trinket on the table, and it's some metallic little trinket from a lost time. You could come up with something super cool off of that, or it could be nothing. It could literally just be trash that somebody left behind about 20 years ago when they came by. Yeah. It could be anything you want, and you don't have to decide as the game begins. You don't need to have that DM panic of, oh my god, there's so much history and I need to know everything. I need to create it all right now. I know some people really enjoy doing that, but I think it would be a very large waste of your time to do that. I think it's more fun to go out in the world and create it as your characters go. Have an idea in your mind of, I think it would be cool if, a past civilization, who knows when, they, everyone floated everywhere, because that's just sort of how evolution worked at that point. Everyone just had telepathic powers and they all just floated. And they rarely walked anywhere. And their sports were so different, and you could be like, I sort of like that concept. We'll workshop it. We'll workshop it as we go in the game, and that's all you have to do in a world like Numenera, where the possibilities are pretty much endless. And from a world like that, you could also go, and maybe you want to play in a D&D-esque world, but maybe you don't want your players to think about that. You don't want your players to, they have read every book that's ever come out, and you have not. You just plain and simple have never read any of the books. You don't know any of the lore, and you know that they're the kind of player that will be like, oh, yes, the dwarven god, Bling Blang, who does this and that, and if I get his blessing, I get this and that, and you're like, I don't know. So maybe you want to play in that setting, but you don't want all of that. You don't want all the baggage that comes with it. Well, there's other RPGs out there for you, like Pathfinder. What people came to be, D&D 3.75 without all of the lore behind it. And you get to do all the fun things. You get to create. But Pathfinder has its own rules and its own world, and you get to explore that with you and your players.
Yeah, and I think the key for building your worlds, I heard a good piece of advice that I've been taking with mine too, because I can see the danger of the world building, right? The trap that you can fall in is burning yourself out by trying to do too much, right? That's the biggest thing that you hear for anybody that's a DM or a GM. Or a player who thinks that they're just in the world, they have nothing that actually contributes to it. And both of those are two concerns. So the thing that I heard was really good advice for while building your own world. Build as much as you are having fun, okay? But the moment you're not having fun, don't force yourself to keep building more for that world, right? Only build what you need and only build while it's fun. So if you're a person who absolutely loves to come up with 20 different types of races of people that live in this world that you're going to run for your characters, and you are having the most fun ever thinking about their culture, the way they speak, what their tone is, how they interact with each other. If that's your fun, do it till your heart's content. But the moment it's not fun, that's when you pull back and you say, I've got enough. I'm just going to play the adventure, and we're going to go with what we have, and we'll make up as we go along when we really need it. Because you always want to make sure you're just having fun also. Like, it never wants to be a burden for you to run it. Because your game won't do the players justice or you justice if you feel like it's a job or you feel like it's not fun, but you're doing it just because they want you to do it, or just because you all agreed to show up every Tuesday to play a game or whatever it might be. And then the second piece of that, when you're building a world, there's nothing that says you can't let the players help you, right? Yes, you want to keep things something secret. Yes, you want to be able to throw things out there that they don't know about, but you can also let them help you build pieces of this world so that they have more of a buy-in. So an example is, maybe you've built the continent, maybe you've built the overall structure, but you can let them decide on a couple of the night orders, maybe a town or a city where their character was from, or they have a family member in that you had never had to design. And when you talk about that, whether it's in their backstory or they're telling it to a friend or the party member or whatever, they can flesh it out and you can let them run with it. You can let them say, yeah, we came from this city of bridges that is nothing but water canals all around, and that's where my sister and family still live now, and it has all this stuff. And you can really let them go and really let them open up in their creativity, because they're helping you fill out your world, and you don't have to be the only one that's building. It's not just your responsibility. Let the players help you out. Let their creativity inspire you. Let your creativity inspire them, and you're all having fun building. And there's games that force you to do that. You play the Apocalypse World Engine games, during character creation, you're building the world. Dungeon World is very much like that. If you play Masks, it's like that. If you play Urban Shadows, which is another Apocalypse game, it's like that. I played another one that was called Undying. Very similar. During character creation, you're letting the players decide a lot of the stuff that's going on, and you're going to use that in the adventure. So bring them in. And nothing says if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you can't do that also. You don't have to just, I'm only doing Forgotten Realms, or I'm only doing Greyhawk, or I'm only doing Eberron, or any one of those. Bring in that creativity, because the one thing this hobby, or this thing that we do, this game that we play, brings out in most of us is creativity, and allowing your creativity to be shared with other people is what we're doing. It's the whole reason we're here.
Yeah, and with all of that, with all of the RPGs you can play, and there's pretty much an RPG for everything. There's an RPG
Amen.
for everything. If you don't want to write your own game, where you are, well, if you want to play a bear, and you want all your characters to be bears, and you want to go and your main goal in life is to find some honey, there's a game out there for that. There's a game where you are all cats. There's one where you're all dogs. There's one where you're all pugs. Yeah, there's one, you can literally do anything. There's one for the old grizzled, grumpy man, and there's one for your young children, your young children who are just getting into RPGs. There's one for your angsty teens. There's some for your 20-somethings. There's something for everyone out there. And you don't have to sit there and create your own game to be able to play a game that you want. I know that there's advice out there for people who want to play certain games, that people say, just make your own game. At this point, just write your own game, write your own setting. Well, first look around for a little bit, because there are so many games out there. You can probably just type in squid RPG, and something will pop up, and you're like, what? Or maybe there's not a squid RPG, but there's an octopus RPG, and they're both, similar in a lot of ways. I know different. Don't get me, I'm a marine biologist. I know, but they're similar enough that in an RPG you could just translate it. You can be like, oh, we are now squids and we have 6 tentacles, not 8. So whatever the rules about all your legs in this one, tentacles are now non-existent in this one. You can just pick and choose what you want. You allow somebody to help you build your world. Allow for somebody else's setting, because the rules help you a lot when it comes to world building. It gives you an idea of how to do something. I know when I first learned RPGs were the thing, I didn't know they were a thing. I had no idea. And then I watched Critical Role and I was like, oh my God, this is a thing. And so from there, my mind was just like, there's so much one can do with something like this. And so when I decided to take it the player character writing aspect, but it just didn't work out that way. So I would start writing a character and then I'd be like, oh, but what about the world around them? And from there I'd be like, oh, it'd be sort of like you were saying, allow your players to help you build a world. I was just like, oh, they come from, why are they more primitive than their, other, because this character was an elf. Why are they not like high elves? Why are they wood elves, not high elves? And me, as someone who doesn't know anything about D&D, I was like, well, because this thing happened in the world and their ancestors chose that this is what they were going to do because they were not going to allow history to repeat itself. And from there, I was like, okay, but why is magic a thing? And then blah, blah, blah. And just from there, you just start asking questions about everything. And from this one character, this one situation, you just build an entire area of the world. You can do that. One of the pieces of advice I always give someone who's trying to be creative, trying to create something, is to just write something down. Just start it. Just start doing something. Don't stare at the blank page. Don't stare at your blank notebook, your notepad, a music notation program. Don't do that. Sit there, put something down, because you're either going to love it, you're going to hate it, or it's going to be okay. But no matter what happens with that first line, that first paragraph, that first page, you have an opinion of it, and you're like, oh, this would make it better. Oh, but what about this? What about that? And from there, your brain's just going to keep going, and you'll be lucky to shut it up. So just start with something and let it grow. Don't force yourself to, build Rome in a day. Don't run before you can walk.
Right. And it just do as much as it's fun for you, and you will gain inspiration from a lot of places. And kind of touching back on your point about there's really is an RPG out there for everything. I mean, me and you have went out and looked, and we've seen lists of RPGs that are available. And if you liked wrestling, there's RPGs for wrestling. If you like giant fighting robots, there's giant fighting robots. There's every show you could think of that you've watched on TV during the 80s, there's probably an RPG for it. You can play a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle RPG. You can play a Transformers RPG. You could play a He-Man RPG. You could play a Barbie RPG. You could play just about anything. There's one for My Little Pony. I mean, there's ones that have to do with pirates. There's things that have to do with low magic or high magic or sci-fi or shadow runs or mirror shades or starships, stars without numbers. There's just so much out there. Every genre is covered. The horror genre is covered. The supernatural genre is covered. The 80s are covered. The 90s are covered. It's just like you can find anything out there from a world aspect and let that give you creativity. It is fun to create your own when you're ready for it. It is fun to put some limits on it so that you don't go crazy, you don't try to go overboard, and you try to build, like I'm going to take a year to build an entire world out before I'm going to play my game. Don't go that far with it. Go far enough that you're having fun. Go far enough that your creativity is really flowing, and then get into playing in it, and you'll have you'll have your players help you guide where you're going to go with it, and you'll get more ideas about it. And to me, world building is about answering questions, right? Because that's all you're really doing. You're answering those questions of what's over here, what is that, why is that, how is that. Those are that. Just write those questions down, and those are going to generate the world that you're going to build. Why is that person there or that group there? Why is that mountain gone? That turns into a whole storyline, a whole timeline, a whole religion could be based off it. I mean, you can jump into every little aspect you want. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote his fantasy books to not only do a commentary on the world he was living in, but he was fascinated with languages. And he wanted to write lots of different types of languages and really studied that. So to have elves speak one way and the orcs speak a certain way and the dwarves speak a certain way, that was fascinating to him. You know, that was what interested him, and that's why he wrote those gigantic books like he did. And you can be just like that. You just get to pick what you're interested in. So maybe it's you're interested in character classes, you're interested in races or politics or combat or tactical warfare or some type of gritty romance, horror or suspense, whatever it is that you're interested in, that your world is going to kind of define that, and you're going to get a bunch of players to come together and say, hey, let's play in this world and start answering some of these questions. What's down that corridor? I don't know. We're going to go find out, and that's really where the fun comes in, and you have a lot of good time. Don't burn yourself out, because that's probably the easiest thing that can happen, but have fun with it. And world building, I think, from a DM or GM's point of view, is where a lot of our fun comes from. It's not about refereeing rules. It's not like my stories when I tell people about the games I've had isn't about, oh, it was really cool when I told PB she had to roll 5 dice for her bow, and then I had to tell her what damage it was going to be. That wasn't the fun of the game. The fun of the game was, it was really neat when PB was faced with Uthgard prisoner, and she took it a whole nother direction than anybody thought at the moment it was going to go. And from that, we spawned a whole kind of side storyline that went with the paladin selling armor and resurrecting this person and bringing it back into the thing. And there was a whole storyline there of a tribe that nobody would have had in their game at all, but because, you know, kind of the players did that, it was fun to create that, or it was fun to talk to our players about how that worked. And then just creating things. We played some one-shots where I brought our players into Hestia, which is an anime, and I just wanted to say, hey, what would it be like if we brought them into this anime I just watched? Or what if we played a game that was very similar to Altered Carbon, which is on Netflix right now? What if we played a game that was a superhero and, hey, we just all went and watched Black Panther. Let's do something out of Wakanda, because that was just super cool, and we all want to try to play around with what's going on in Wakanda. You know, those are the things you get to do with world building, whether it's your own or others, and you can rename it. You can say, I'm fascinated with the Civil War of America, but I'm going to put an analogy in a different world, my own world, and it's going to be called the War of the Swords. And it was between two factions that happen to be East and West, but really all you're doing is reskinning something you have a fascination with. It could be anything like that, where you can just put it in your world and you use it as a world building technique, and you can have fun and you can do it over and over and over, and it allows you to let out your creativity. I know I'm one of the people that I'm not like a good musician. I can't draw or illustrate well. I am not a wordsmith as far as writing a book. So my creativity has only been able to come out, I think, when I'm doing world building in RPGs, because that's something I can do, and I have a skill, or at least I'm practicing it and using it and I'm having fun with it, versus maybe I don't have the talent of the other ones. So maybe you're like me and you're just like, I want to create. You don't need a lot of skill to do world building. You just need an imagination is all you need.
And one of the cool things you can do about playing in an RPG is the fact that it's escapism. You know, playing a game, it's escapism.
Oh, you went a little robot-y on us. How's your internet connection? Oh, yep, not hearing you. So I'll keep going. Every now and then we have a little bit of technical difficulty. Go ahead and jump in and interrupt me when you think your connection's back to good. And Yeah, she was kind of going with the point of escapism, and that's exactly what we're doing. It's this idea of you get a chance to be outside of your world a little bit. You get a chance to uh, rewrite history in some ways, or explore what route a history could have taken if you want to put it in your world. You get a chance to just leave behind the things that are going on in your day. Maybe your car broke down, maybe homework was really bad, maybe grades or whatever, but for this 2 hours a night, you get to go be the awesome warrior badass that saves the village and helps everybody out. How you doing? You back? Oh, okay. Still having a little bit of internet connection, so she might bounce out. That could happen. Oh, I see a head nod.
There we go.
There it is.
There we go.
We're back.
There we go. That was a Discord problem, actually.
Oh, okay.
Not a me problem.
Good.
Yeah. So I didn't really catch what you said.
I was going on with your escapism point, but go ahead and keep going with your escapism.
So, with my escapism. So, about my escapism is that something I've seen within people I follow on Twitter and the people who have just started playing D&D and just RPGs is that you have an opportunity to rewrite the world. You have an opportunity where your characters are representative of what the actual world looks like, not just your part of the world or just who you get to see. You get to write in, like in Critical Role, there's Watchmaster Bryce, who is a gender fluid, non-binary character that, you know, uses they them pronouns, and just very casually NPC side character, non-binary, they them, never really talked about, just said looked androgynous, and everyone always, you know, referred to them as they them. Easy. You can have huge major characters who aren't straight men, straight white men. They can be of a different race. They could be of a different orientation. They can be whatever you want. You know, there's Jamon Saoud, again, from Critical Role. I don't watch much RPG shows, so I don't know if other people do this too, but I know Matthew Mercer does a phenomenal job. Jamon Saoud, ruler of Marquette, a whole town area thing, right? And aside from bringing a brass dragon, spoiler, I guess, they them again, androgynous. You know, never talked about, really just like, what are you? Never those questions. Is a very safe space all of a sudden for this character. You get to create your own safe space. You can have your dark, gritty world, but you can also have the good part of the world, what one would wish the world was like now. You can have that form of escapism where you make that world what you want the world to be like. You get to create your own, like I said, I hate to keep saying it, but safe place to play your character and be a total badass and still be who you are, who you want them to be. I know I've played characters in games who, well, pretty much every character I play is some sort of gay, and I've played characters who are non-binary before. I've played characters who are, I don't give a fuck. They're gender fluid, right? So it is not to say that if you're gender fluid, you don't give a fuck. That character in particular didn't give a fuck. So you get to create that in your RPG world, along with all these cool, amazing monuments and stuff. You can even look at it in the small macro sense, right? You can have a war-torn city, but still have the happy ending, right? You could still unite families together. It doesn't always have to be realistic in that manner, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what will draw a lot of people to role-playing games. And as they see them, it's your chance to sometimes play a different version of yourself, a better version of yourself sometimes, maybe a little bit of worse version of yourself, and to explore those things, because exploring those ideas and having understanding of them makes you a more informed person anyways. And it's a lot of things of what we do. And then as a person that's running those games or building those worlds for players to be in, you're getting buy-in from them in the spaces they want to explore, the things they're interested in, along with what you're interested in. You know, you're trying to match up what's fun for them and what's fun for you. So if you and your friends are really big into cyberspace and cool, gritty mercenaries that are hired by corporations to go do jobs because you all loved Blade Runner and you went and saw it like 50 times together, and that's just your guys' thing, then you can build that. You can do that in any genre that's out there. Most of the rule systems will work. You just need to build the setting for it, and you can bring that up. And that's what the fun thing is about world building is. So I think if anything for us to kind of not partake, but to impart, that's where I was going, thank you. Impart onto you is the courage to go ahead and say, yes, build your own world or use one that's out there and modify it a little bit when you need to. Do it as much as fun as you're having to do it with. As far as if it's fun to make a city, then make a city. If it's fun to make a town, make a town. If you're having so much fun and you want to make an entire continent full of cultures, then just keep right on going as long as you're having fun and doing it. And don't let it stop you from playing the game or running the game or bringing your players in, even from early on or even in the beginning, because you're only going to get to so much of it in the first session anyways. You're going to get into a town and you're going to be there for a couple of sessions before they move on anyways, and you can inform your design based on how the players are doing things and where you want to take that next storyline arc. Or it might get influenced by the next movie you watch, the next book you read, the next comic you flip through, the next video game you play. All these places are going to influence you during this process, and you're going to get to bring those elements in and have fun creating that. So world building's fun. Everybody should try it. Everybody just start writing stuff down. Just start exploring little pieces that seem interesting to you. And if it doesn't seem interesting to you, like you're like, well, it's not very interesting for me to create a whole pantheon of gods. Well, guess what? There's lots of versions that you can grab from other games. You can grab gods from the Greeks or the Romans. You can grab gods from Faerun or Greyhawk. You can grab the way that Star Trek handles religion. You can grab anything that you want to do that you don't want to have to get into. You can grab it from somewhere else, plug it in so you don't have to worry about it, and really only focus on the world building aspects that you're interested in. And that'll keep you having a lot of fun. So I think those are pretty good. I think world building wise, if you want to put questions in the comments of the YouTube video, if you didn't happen to catch this live, and you want give us your ideas, give us your tips and tricks on how you do your world building, or things you saw other people do that you really like, whether it was what you liked Matt Mercer did, what you liked Matt Colville did, what you liked your DM at the Adventure League on Wednesday nights or whatever at the game store you're at. You really liked how they did something. Put that stuff in there. We'd love to hear about it and see it and talk about it and discuss it in the comments of the YouTube after the fact. And we're always, want to be interactive with the audience as much as we can. So typically, I think we did really good there. Do you have any last minute? We're ready to move on to we like to have a segment right towards the end of our session. This is perfect timing because I think we're right about there. Is me and PB like to maybe point out or highlight some different things out there that you might not know about. Kickstarter games that are coming up. It might be stuff that comes from DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG or some other source that we happen to stumble on and say, hey, we really think other people might be interested in these. So we had a couple of this week. I know PB had a couple and I had a couple that we found out on Kickstarter. So I'll let you go ahead and start off. Tell us a little bit about a couple things that you're excited about this week.
All right. So to go on from what we've been talking about, world building, and starting sort of DMing and doing all that stuff, there's a Kickstarter out there right now for a project called The Hidden Halls of Hazakor, which is an RPG adventure for beginning dungeon masters and first level characters, and it's written for D&D 5e. So this is an entire thing that just simplifies it all. It simplifies your first adventure. It simplifies it for the DM and the characters, and it's fun, it's cool, it has great art, and it keeps all the same information from 5e. It doesn't really add anything else. It just simplifies it for you so you can level up next time you run a game. the other game I want to shout out, I saw this one on Tumblr years ago, months maybe, ages ago, it feels like at this point. And it's called Good Society, a Jane Austen role-playing game. Remember when we were talking about that there's literally an RPG for everything? Well, if you're a Jane Austen fan, here you go. And it has such a cool style. I've read a little bit about it in like background setting, and it sounds super cool. If you like Jane Austen, if you like that world, if you like that Victorian era, is it Victorian era, Elizabethan? I don't know much about that era about literature. You're gonna love this. I promise you, you're gonna love it. It's already passed. Both of these Kickstarters have already met their goals. Now it's just about meeting stretch goals, and it's about just supporting the people writing it. So the first one again, The Hidden Halls of Hazakor, Hazakor, and Good Society, a Jane Austen role-playing game. So those are mine for the week.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and put I'll put those links in the video details so that if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go ahead and check out the links there and you'll be able to find them. If you're watching this through like a VOD and Twitch, you can always just go over to my YouTube channel and find where those links will be, which is you can just put in youtube.com/SirLucien and my page just comes right up. For me, this was one that we talked about a little bit last week, but I just wanted to bring up one more time, was Strongholds and Followers by Matt Colville. And the only reason I'm mentioning it again, because he's blown way past his what they wanted to budget for this project. But he has one last stretch goal to go, and it is the stretch goal to beat the reigning record of an RPG on Kickstarter, which was like 1,300,000 and something. So he's gone like $1 over that as a stretch goal to become the RPG that is had the highest funded in Kickstarter. And if he does that, he's going to go ahead and add a pirate ship base to the Strongholds and Followers. So Strongholds has lots of different types of things. So it could be a keep. It's got rules for keeps and wizard towers and floating cities and those kinds of things as a base for your players. And he's going to add in pirate ship if he gets to that last stretch goal. So that's another one that's out there, and that is Strongholds and Followers. And then I found another one that was very interesting. It is called TRINITY CONTINUUM, the AEON RPG. It's a very futuristic, but also goes across quite a bit of a big timeline. So you can play from some very different time scales. You can play with some very different technology levels, and the art looks great on it. They are funded, but they're trying to meet a lot of their stretch goals, and it feels a little bit more like sci-fi action. It feels a little bit more like Sliders or time travel. It feels pulpy in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of stuff that it can do. And the rule set is, I want to say, the story path system, which is a D10 system, dice pool. So what they do is you have, say, a pool of 6 dice, and to make a success, you have to have a certain number of successes. So maybe you need to roll 3 of the 6 in successes. So it's a really cool system. You'll see a lot of these types of games out there. We played a few that are very similar. Nice, big, thick hardcover. If you're getting into it, it only costs like $10, I think, to get the PDF version. If you go to the hardcover, it's like $40, and the hardcover looks fantastic. Looks really high detail, great artwork that they've got for the book. So definitely one that I'm going to be backing, and looks like a lot of fun to play. So those are the two that I wanted to go ahead and highlight. We'll put those in the links in the video description. But I think it's time we jump out of here. So thanks for joining us on the Standard Array on a Sunday evening. We're going to continue to have it on Sunday at 9 p.m. for a bit because we want to see what kind of audience we can generate, and then we might try some other different times later on down the road, and we'll keep you informed through all of our ways of kind of putting out announcements and stuff, which is mostly like Twitter at this point. So you can reach me at SirLucien Gaming for Twitter, all one word. If you want to, you're here on Twitch, but if you weren't, you want to check me out on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/SirLucien. And then on YouTube, you can put in youtube.com/SirLucien, all one word again. It's Lucien. I know some people spell Lucian a little bit different depending on where you're at, but that's Lucien. And you will find all of my information. How about yours, PB?
Let's see. You can find me at PB Plays Inside on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. I use all of them. Some of them seldomly. Let's see. As for my schedule, Mondays, Tuesdays, I play D&D, one on SirLucien's channel on Mondays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And on Tuesdays, I play at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time over on twitch.tv/Anarsis. On Wednesdays, on Wednesdays, we're rebroadcasting here on SirLucien's channel, Standard Array. Well, I'll say that later. Saturdays, I don't do anything. TBD. That one's TBD right now. And Sunday we do the Standard Array. Also, to add in while you're following all of us on Twitter, go ahead and follow us at Standard Array. The Standard Array over on Twitter, where we can communicate with us directly and just for this show.
Yeah, and adding to that, I'm with PB I run the Monday night game of Storm King's Thunder at 8:30. I'm a player with PB and the Anarsis game, which is the Adventure League Tomb of Annihilation. The Wednesday rebroadcast I'm going to do in the afternoon, probably around noon, is my Saturday morning Dungeons and Dragons show rebroadcast from the Saturday morning. So that'll be like on 12 p.m. on Wednesday is the rebroadcast, and the Standard Array is going to be, I think on Wednesday it's going to be like a 9 o'clock or somewhere in that range rebroadcast on Wednesday, so you can check it out again there too. And then Saturday mornings I'm doing a show with Jordan, the PH is silent, and that is the Saturday morning Dungeons & Dragons show, or we call it the D&D show. And then obviously Sunday here with Standard Array, so we're having a good time doing it. So that, I think, is our show for tonight. I also thanks everybody for showing up, and make sure you come back for the next one. If you have any suggestions, you can send it to us on all of those things we just listed as far as getting a hold of us. And we can't wait to see you in the next one.
Bye guys.